why can Russia not gain air superiority? Let's see what his arguments are, and let's see if he's right or not.
At the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, all predictions pointed towards the same thing. After the ballistic missile barrage on airports and military positions, the Russian Air Force will quickly swoop in, destroy the remaining Ukrainian Air Force and air defenses, and establish full superiority in the air. However, 18 days into the war, Russia still hasn't achieved air superiority.
Yeah, that's true. There are a lot of reports about Russia not having air superiority in multiple areas of Ukraine, which is really weird, not gonna lie, because they have the planes. They have a lot of planes. It might point out to something of the sorts of, from a strategic point of view, they're not okay with it. I don't know why. They must have some reason behind it. Or the Air Force is not 100% on board with this invasion.
In fact, they aren't even close to it. On top of that, just their visually confirmed losses add up to 12 planes.
Okay, so these are the losses that they've had so far. Remember, this is just like the first 3 weeks of the war, guys.
Just the visually confirmed ones. The real numbers are higher. Meanwhile, according to US officials, 80% of Ukraine's fixed-wing assets are still intact and Ukrainian air defenses are still shooting down planes, helicopters and missiles. Ukrainian air forces and air defenses aren't only surviving, but succeeding.
Okay, so Ukrainian Air Force are succeeding. I have to be honest about this. I think it's a little bit bullshit. So I've seen a few of these articles. Of course, a lot of the times it's true, right? They actually even have videos of Ukrainians gunning down a lot of Russian planes. But I've seen a lot of these articles, including this one, if I remember correctly, being fact-checked by Reuters and proven that it was not real. I'm not sure if this one exactly, but a few of them had been proven not to be real. At the same time, you have to realize we're still really early into this whole situation. We don't really know what's actually happening, and the information that's coming out of that area is really fucking massively propaganda from both sides, obviously. You don't really want to give your real numbers in war. During that war, you don't give your real numbers of what's happening, how many you're losing, how many you're killing off. It's also very, very different in 2022 compared to before.
So what's going on here? How is this even possible? Ukrainians don't have flying tractors after all. Here are the main reasons for the Russian Air Force's spectacular failure.
I'm curious what his main reasons are. I really hope he presents logical arguments. I don't think I've seen this channel before, so I'm really curious.
Smart Ukrainian maneuvering.
Smart Ukrainian maneuvering, all right?
Ukrainians have been shuffling their assets around in a very effective manner ever since the start of the war. This is why the Russians' initial rocket barrage didn't break them, and is a major factor in the Russian Air Force being virtually ineffective against them.
So he's saying that they're shuffling their airplanes around. Where is he getting this information though? I'm curious if he's actually giving some sources for this. I hate being Mr. No-No here, but I don't think that's really much of the case. Ukraine is not really shuffling their air force around. I think what's happening is Ukraine is using a lot of neighboring countries to their advantage because they can. A couple of instances where Ukraine was actually sending planes to Romania to refuel and restock, some say, but it's not confirmed. Let's see his argument first.
This relates to reason number 2. Terrible Russian equipment or the lack thereof. There are pictures.
Terrible Russian equipment. Okay, so his first argument is actually just that statement. He doesn't back it up with anything. What? You just directly say, oh, it's because they're shuffling their plane. And then you go to terrible and lacking Russian equipment. That's not true. First off, like I said, I don't know where he's getting the thing with the maneuvering. But terrible or lacking Russian equipment is not true, dude. It's really not true. The Su-35 is probably one of the best fucking planes in the world right now. So they don't have terrible equipment. My personal opinion is that, like I said before, I really don't think the Air Force is on board with this invasion. I really think that there's a lot of division in the Russian army right now. And I do also think that they're using the bad equipment first to get rid of it in a way, because they know that right now Ukraine is pumped up with javelins, is pumped up with all sorts of anti-air, anti-tank, and they want to, hate saying it, but send in the cannon fodder before the real equipment arrives, or holding back the real equipment in case of things escalating with other countries.
There are pictures floating around defense blogs showing Russian pilots in jets above Syria using commercial GPS units in the cockpit. Things like
So there's pictures going around of Russian pilots using civilian navigation equipment. All right, that's a Garmin, by the way. Yes, it is used in civilian planes. I do have to say that that's not uncommon for the military. Let's just put this out there. That's really not uncommon for the military, especially from a few perspectives. It's a lot easier to use. I really don't see why this would be a problem. I actually don't see why this would be a problem. As a pilot, I have a pilot's license. I'm not a military pilot, but I can tell you that it's the same shit. Like, inside the cockpit, doesn't matter if it's a military or a civilian plane. Only difference is the G's you can pull the maneuverability of the plane, and the fact that you have weapons on board. And you just have like a couple of buttons. That's it. And a lot of these pictures, I'm not even sure if they're true. I mean, anyone can just slap on a couple of pictures and say, oh yeah, it's because of this. I'm guaranteeing you there's definitely a lot of resistance from the armed forces. They just don't want it to leak out too much. If the Ukrainian Air Force was doing amazing, they would not insist on a no-fly zone. They're getting their ass kicked. That is the reality. And this video is literally just clickbait at this point, because Russia can achieve air supremacy if they want to easily. There's got to be a reason why they're not achieving it. It's not just, oh, because their equipment is bad. Let's see his third argument,
indicating massive problems with Russian equipment even prior to Ukraine's invasion. Not only that, but Ukrainians also recovered pieces of paper from downed Russian jets with strike coordinates written on them. That's right.
Okay, this guy is clearly, he has no idea what he's talking about. Military pilots and civilian pilots, but especially military pilots, they have a small notebook like this, and they keep this notebook strapped here to the leg. You strap it to the leg and you write on it your coordinates. You don't put the coordinates in a digital navigation equipment inside the plane. You input it there whenever you need it, but you have it on the paper on your leg so you know where you're going. It's called a navlog. You need to do this before the flight, and this is normal. What the fuck is this guy talking about? He's clearly not qualified to talk about this.
Pieces of paper before takeoff, but when they get there, Ukrainians will have moved away already, and the pilot has nothing to strike. And then some of them get shot down by Ukrainian air defenses.
Okay, that's a really weak argument. So he's saying that when they get to their original navigation destination, the targets are not there, and that they have nothing to strike, and they get shot down by the Ukrainians. He has no idea what he's talking about. Did he even consult with the pilot before? Or did he just like make a video to get the views without actually knowing what he's talking about?
And so reason number 3 is the lack of proper training for pilots.
I can tell you right now, this is complete bullshit. There's no lack of proper training for pilots. Pilots in general have a certain amount of hours that they fly per year. Military pilots have an allocated per year amount of flight hours. So in Romania, the minimum flight time for pilots a few years ago was really bad. It was actually below the threshold, was 35 hours. But by comparison, I remember when I checked for Russia back then, it was a lot more, like a few hundred hours. The only reason you would have lack of proper pilot training is if you didn't fly enough hours as pilots. Military pilots in Russia have a lot of fuel, they have a lot of planes, and they do fly a lot. That is really not an issue. And saying that 15 planes that were taken down in 21 days, 15 planes taken down, it's nothing. I would have expected 100 Russian planes to be downed right now. But the fact is, there's not 100 Russian planes downed. There's 15. And the fact that there's only been 15 downed, it's telling me that Ukraine's got way bigger casualties that they're not declaring. This video is crap. I'm sorry. I don't have anything against this guy. It's the first time I'm watching this. But as a pilot, I feel really disgusted because he didn't do his research. Like, he really didn't do his research, and he's got no clue what he's talking about. I'm going to continue watching it to see what else he says, but massively disappointed.
Pilots fly far less than NATO pilots, half as much in fact, and don't practice any complex maneuvers beyond flying in pairs and hitting the occasional ground targets. This is what they did in Syria as well. But what works against rebel militias won't work against a modern, mechanized opponent with proper air defenses. This relates to reason number 4, Russian inability to organize on a large scale.
No, I'm going to pick on this because he said something really stupid again. Oh, God. So Russian pilots fly half as much. Where did he get that info from? I'm curious. Even if he got it online, that's minimum threshold, because the only thing you actually see online is the minimum. They never tell you how. Every pilot flies a different amount of hours, guys. It's not like, oh, the minimum is 35. I'm going to fly 35. No, you're going to fly 70 minimum. You need to have that 35. Otherwise, you lose your license. It's a big difference, man.
But what works against rebel militias won't work against a modern, mechanized opponent with proper air defenses.
No, you're wrong. You're very, very wrong, and you have no clue what you're talking about, dude. I'm sorry for repeating myself, guys, but I have to mention this. So he's saying that all they're doing is flying in formation and striking at rebel targets. What the fuck is a rebel target, first off? No such thing as a rebel target. Are you playing Star Wars online or some shit? The main problem with the planes in Russia right now, from what I can see at least, is the fact that they actually don't have enough guided missiles. They actually are still relying on a lot of unguided, unassisted missiles. Literally just like, oh, I'm pointing there, it's gonna go that direction. It's not gonna go left or right a little bit more. because it's not guided in like layman's terms.
And number 4, Russian inability to organize on a scale. To establish dominance over the Ukrainian sky, Russians would need very complex, massive air maneuvers coordinating a large number of aircraft at the same time.
No, they would not need that. You're really wrong. You have no idea how to achieve air superiority, dude.
4, Russian inability to organize on a large scale. To establish
Russian inability to organize on a large scale. That's not how you achieve air superiority, dude. The way you achieve air superiority doesn't matter how many planes you have in the sky at one point in that particular area. What matters is your reaction time. So what matters is having the airports ready to react whenever you detect the other country's planes, and at the same time having the runways not damaged and ready for action. The first thing the Russians did was destroy most of the runways, the military runways that the Ukrainians had, and the military installations to help out the planes from taking off, which is the logical tactical thing to do, by the way. And the Russians don't have that issue, because they still have the range to go from Rostov, which is probably their main air hub, all the way in whatever they want into the south of Ukraine, and probably somewhere in the north to go over the northern Ukrainian part. Like, it literally takes 20 minutes. And the way that it goes is, let's say, Russian radars detect 5 Ukrainian planes, as an example, right? Then they say, 5 planes in that particular area. Pilots that are already ready in the plane, they're literally just waiting for the order to go. They get the information, boom, they go, they do their navigation, probably whilst en route, and they know what they're dealing with. He's thinking like in World War II terms for some reason, like, you need to have 1,000 planes over Ukraine at all times to make sure you're killing off the little German infantrymen.
Over the Ukrainian sky, Russians would need very complex, massive air maneuvers coordinating a large number of aircraft at the same time, and they are just not able.
No, they wouldn't need a large number of aircrafts at the same time, because the Ukrainian Air Force is very small, and they would only need a fraction of their air fleet right now.
To do that, Russians don't have the experience or the knowledge to pull off such actions. Instead,
why would they not have the experience or the knowledge to pull off such actions? They literally have combat experience from Syria, from Chechnya, from multiple different combat operations. But aside from that, it's not really difficult to do. This is just really basic shit to do.
They do the same thing in the air as they do on the ground. In lieu of proper planning and organization, they just throw more soldiers and equipment at the problem, hoping the Ukrainians will eventually buckle. But it seems like this will not happen. Consequently, the Ukrainians are able to hold off the Russians and cause significant losses. This is why Russians don't have air superiority after 18 days and most likely won't be able to achieve it, period. Now, some people
completely disagree. This entire list is completely wrong.
Might come in and say, not so fast. The Russians must be saving their strength for the real air campaign, which is definitely coming. Operation Godot is imminent, where the Ukrainians will get wiped out. We've all heard people saying
I don't think the Russians are waiting for anything, to be fair. I do think that the Russians are keeping back planes, not because they need them in Ukraine, but because they might be worried that other countries might join in, and it would scale into a little bit more of a war than just a local Ukrainian war, maybe a world war. Just as a precaution, not saying it's going to happen, fuck's sake, I hope not, but just in case, they're probably keeping a lot of their planes ready for that situation. Plus, I mean, it's logical from a military perspective, especially when you have a country as large as Russia, which is the biggest country in the world, right? You need to have planes covering every area of your country, all your borders. You need to have soldiers covering all of your borders. So his arguments are like a little kid who played war games in school and he thinks he knows what's happening and he's making a video out of
this, but this is a bad assessment. As a rule of thumb, if Russia could have established their superiority, they would have done so already, but they cannot, so they did not, due to reasons detailed in this video. I hope this little blurb from me helped people better understand the war situation in Ukraine.
I think this little video is not helping people understand the situation. I think this little video is getting you a lot of views and he's actually misinforming people. I'll be honest. I find it pretty sad, not gonna lie. Sad that this is my first video from this channel, so now I have a bad impression of it. I hope I'm wrong. You guys are saying in the chat that he's got good videos. I'll check some of his other videos. I do think that Russia does have air superiority. It's just that it's not air superiority like it was in the Second World War. Air superiority in 2022 is different because in the Second World War, to get from here in Sumy to get all the way to Lviv, it would take him literally half a day, right? It would take him half a day to navigate that area, so you need to have planes ahead of time delivered in that particular area. You need to have planes hovering over the entire country to achieve air superiority. in the Second World War. But in 2022, when from Sumy to Lviv, literally all of Ukraine, it takes them half an hour, you don't need to have planes all over the country at all times. You just take off whenever you detect enemy activity, so you take whenever that happens. That's how it goes. That's air superiority in 2022. It's modern warfare, guys. It's not Second World War.